I always believed I knew exactly who I was. I was 34, happily married, and convinced that my life was an open book. But then, a simple DNA test arrived in the mail, and within minutes, my entire reality shattered. I found out I had a twin sister I never knew existed, and a father who had been searching for us for 3 decades, believing we were lost forever. This isn't just a story about a long-lost family. It's a story about a secret that was kept for 34 years, a tragic misunderstanding that tore 2 people apart, and the incredible journey of how we finally found our way home. If you love stories that are raw, emotional, and packed with twists you won't see coming, stay with me, because this is my truth. Let's go back to the beginning. My name is Emily Carter. I was 34 years old, happily married, and raising a 7-year-old daughter named Sophie in a quiet town outside Chicago. My life wasn't perfect, but it was stable. I had loving parents. My father, Richard, was a retired school principal. My mother, Susan, had worked as a nurse for most of her life. They had been married for over 40 years and were the kind of couple everyone admired. Growing up, I never questioned my place in the family. I looked a little different from my parents, but people often joked that genetics worked in mysterious ways. My father had dark hair and brown eyes. My mother had chestnut hair and green eyes. I had blonde hair and bright blue eyes. Whenever I asked about it, my mother would smile. "You got those from your grandmother," she always said. And I believed her. Why wouldn't I? Everything changed on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting in a hospital waiting room, staring at my phone. My mother had been diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer 6 months earlier. The doctors had tried everything: chemotherapy, radiation, experimental treatments. Nothing worked. The woman who had spent her life helping others was slowly fading away. That afternoon, her doctor asked to speak with me privately. I knew it wasn't good news before he opened his mouth. "We're running out of options," he said gently. I nodded. I couldn't speak. A week later, my mother passed away. The funeral was held on a cold, gray morning. Hundreds of people attended. Former patients, neighbors, friends, family. Everyone had a story about how Susan Carter had helped them. I stood beside her coffin and wondered how the world could continue without her. For weeks afterward, I lived in a fog. Then one evening, my father called. "Emily, can you come over tomorrow?" His voice sounded strange, tired, nervous. Of course. When I arrived the next morning, he was sitting alone at the kitchen table. There was a small wooden box in front of him. The same box my mother always kept hidden in her bedroom closet. My stomach tightened. "What is it?" He pushed the box toward me. "Your mother wanted you to have this." I slowly opened it. Inside were old photographs, letters, documents, and a sealed envelope with my name written across the front. My hands trembled. The handwriting was unmistakably hers. I opened the envelope. The letter began with 4 words that instantly made my heart race. "My dearest Emily." The next sentence changed everything. "There is something I never told you." I stopped breathing. I continued reading. "If you are reading this, I am gone, and it is finally time for the truth." My eyes filled with tears. The letter explained that before she met my father, she had briefly been involved with another man, a man named Daniel. she became pregnant. But before she could tell him, he disappeared. According to the letter, he died in a car accident. Heartbroken and alone, she later met my father. When I was born, Richard raised me as his own daughter. I looked up from the letter. My father couldn't meet my eyes. "Is this true?" I whispered. He nodded slowly. "Your mother and I agreed never to tell you." The room felt like it was spinning. Everything I thought I knew about my life suddenly felt uncertain. My father reached across the table. "Emily, I loved you from the moment I first held you." I started crying. "So, you're not my biological father?" "No." The word shattered something inside me. But then he squeezed my hand. "And nothing will ever change the fact that you're my daughter." For several weeks, I struggled to process the news. Part of me wanted to forget everything. Another part couldn't stop wondering about Daniel. Who was he? What kind of person was he? Did I have relatives somewhere? Did they even know I existed? The questions became impossible to ignore. One night, my husband Michael sat beside me on the couch. "You need answers." "I know." "Then find them." A few days later, I ordered a DNA test. I told myself it was only curiosity, nothing more. I mailed the sample and tried not to think about it. 6 weeks later, the results arrived. I opened the website while drinking coffee at the kitchen table. At first, everything seemed normal. Ethnicity estimates, genetic matches. Then I saw a notification. "Close family match found." My heart skipped a beat. I clicked. The screen loaded. And then I nearly dropped my coffee mug. The match showed a 49.8% DNA connection. Relationship estimate? Full sibling. I stared at the screen in disbelief. A full sibling? That was impossible. I was an only child. At least, that's what I had believed my entire life. The profile belonged to a woman named Sarah Mitchell. Age, 34. Location, Denver, Colorado. Exactly my age. I refreshed the page. The information didn't change. My hands started shaking. If Sarah was my full sibling, then everything in my mother's letter was wrong. I spent the next hour staring at the screen. A full sibling. Not a cousin, not a half-sibling. A full sibling. According to the DNA company, there was almost no chance the result was wrong. I called customer support. The representative patiently explained how the matching system worked. By the time the call ended, I knew one thing for certain. Sarah Mitchell was closely related to me. Very closely. Possibly a twin. I felt sick. My mother had always been honest. Or at least I thought she had been. But now it seemed she had taken an enormous secret to her grave. For 2 days, I did nothing. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't focus on work. Every spare moment was spent staring at Sarah's profile. Finally, I noticed there was an option to send a message. My finger hovered over the keyboard. What do you even say to someone who might be your sister? After several attempts, I typed, "Hello, my name is Emily Carter. I recently received a DNA match indicating we may be closely related. I know this message may seem strange, but I would love to talk if you're comfortable." I read it 3 times, then pressed send. The waiting was torture. Hours passed. Then a day. Then another. By the 3rd day, I had convinced myself she would never respond. Then my phone buzzed. A notification. My heart nearly exploded. Sarah had replied. Her message was short. Emily, I've been staring at your profile for days. I think we're looking for the same answers. I immediately burst into tears. We exchanged messages for hours. The similarities were unbelievable. We were both 34, both loved reading, both hated seafood, both had suffered migraines since childhood. The more we talked, the stranger it became. Then she sent a photograph. The moment I opened it, I froze. It felt like looking into a mirror. The same blue eyes, the same nose, the same smile. Even Michael gasped when he saw it. My God. I nodded. Neither of us could speak. Sarah and I arranged a video call for the following evening. When her face appeared on the screen, I felt chills run through my body. She looked so much like me that it was unsettling. For several seconds, we simply stared at each other. Finally, she laughed nervously. This is crazy. I laughed too. Then we both started crying. The emotional weight of the moment was overwhelming. Neither of us understood what was happening, but somehow, we already felt connected. During the conversation, Sarah told me her story. She had been adopted as an infant. Her adoptive parents were wonderful people. They had always been honest about her adoption, but they knew very little about her biological family. The adoption records were sealed. The agency provided almost no information. She had taken a DNA test, hoping to learn more. Instead, she found me. The next question was obvious. Could we actually be twins? The DNA company couldn't confirm it directly, but every clue pointed in that direction. Sarah agreed to meet in person. 2 weeks later, I flew to Denver. I was terrified, excited, confused, all at the same time. When I entered the airport cafe where we planned to meet, I spotted her immediately. She stood up. For a moment, the entire room seemed to disappear. It felt like seeing another version of myself. Neither of us spoke. We simply hugged and cried. People around us stared. I didn't care. For 34 years, I had lived without knowing she existed. Now she was standing right in front of me. We spent the entire weekend talking, sharing memories, comparing childhood photographs, discovering countless similarities. But one question remained unanswered. Why had we been separated? Neither of us knew. And unfortunately, the one person who might have explained everything was gone. My mother. Back home, I began searching through the documents she left behind. Every letter, every photograph, every note. Weeks passed without success. Then one night, while examining the wooden box again, I noticed something strange. The bottom panel looked thicker than it should. I carefully pressed against it. A hidden compartment opened. Inside was another envelope. My name was written across the front. My hands trembled. I opened it immediately. What I found inside changed everything once again. There was a photograph. My mother was holding 2 newborn babies. Not 1, 2. I stared at the image in shock. Twins, Sarah and I. There was also a handwritten note, and as I began reading, tears filled my eyes. My darling daughters, if you have found this letter, then the truth has finally come to light. I pray that one day you will understand the impossible choice I made. I could barely continue. The letter explained that when my mother gave birth, she was alone, frightened, and financially desperate. She had no support, no family willing to help, no money, no stability. She had discovered she was carrying twins only weeks before delivery. According to her letter, a wealthy couple had been unable to have children. They desperately wanted a baby. At the time, my mother believed she could not provide for 2 infants. Faced with an impossible situation, she made a decision that haunted her for the rest of her life. She allowed 1 baby to be adopted, Sarah. The other baby stayed with her, me. As I read the final pages, my tears fell onto the paper. Every word was filled with guilt, regret, heartbreak. She had spent decades wondering if Sarah was safe, happy, loved. But fear prevented her from searching. She worried that revealing the truth would destroy both families. I sat at my kitchen table until sunrise. For the first time, I truly understood my mother's burden. She hadn't separated us because she didn't love us. She had done it because she believed she had no other choice. The next day, I called Sarah. She cried while I read the letter aloud. For several minutes after I finished, neither of us spoke. Finally, she whispered, "She loved us." Yes, she never stopped loving us. Never. The discovery brought us peace. But the story wasn't over. Because hidden among the papers was one final surprise. A name. A full name. Daniel Hayes. The man my mother believed had died before we were born. The man she believed was our biological father. Curious, Sarah and I began searching. At first, we found nothing. Then Sarah located an old newspaper archive. And that's when we made a shocking discovery. Daniel Hayes had never died. The car accident happened, but he survived. For 34 years, our mother had believed he was gone. She had built her entire life around a misunderstanding. Sarah and I stared at the screen in disbelief. If Daniel was alive, then our biological father was still somewhere out there, and he had no idea he had daughters. 2 daughters. The search took months. There were false leads, dead ends, disappointments. Then one evening, Sarah called me. I could hear excitement in her voice. "I found him!" I nearly dropped my phone. "What?" "I found him!" The address belonged to a small town in Oregon. A retired mechanic, age 62. The timeline matched perfectly. We arranged a visit. The entire flight felt unreal. When we arrived, neither of us could stop shaking. What if he rejected us? What if he didn't want to know us? What if we destroyed his life? Finally, we stood outside a modest white house. I knocked. Footsteps approached. The door opened. An older man stood there. Blue eyes, the same blue eyes Sarah and I shared. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then he looked from me to Sarah and back again. His face turned pale. "What is this?" I swallowed hard. "My name is Emily." Sarah stepped forward. "And I'm Sarah." The man stared at us. Then tears appeared in his eyes. Because somehow, before we explained anything, he already knew. Daniel's hands were trembling. For several seconds, he simply stared at us. Then he stepped backward and grabbed the doorframe as if he suddenly needed support. "I know those eyes," he whispered. My heart pounded. Sarah stood beside me, frozen. Daniel looked from one face to the other. Then tears began rolling down his cheeks. Oh my God. I had imagined this moment 100 different ways. Anger, confusion, rejection. But not this. Never this. Daniel invited us inside. The living room was simple and warm. Family photographs covered the walls. A dog slept near the fireplace. The house felt lived in, comfortable, safe. And yet none of us felt comfortable. We sat in silence for several moments. Finally, Daniel spoke. "Tell me everything." So we did. We told him about the DNA test, about Sarah's adoption, about my mother's letters, about the discovery that we were twins. The entire time, he listened without interrupting. When we finished, he covered his face with both hands. Then he cried. Not quietly, not politely. The kind of crying that comes from decades of pain. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red. I thought Susan abandoned me. Sarah and I exchanged shocked looks. "What?" I asked. Daniel nodded slowly. "The day of the accident, I was driving to see her." His voice cracked. "A truck hit my car. I spent weeks in the hospital." My stomach tightened. When I finally recovered, Susan was gone. He stood and walked toward a bookshelf. From an old box, he pulled out a bundle of letters. Dozens of them, yellowed with age. He placed them on the table. I wrote to her. He pointed at the letters. Again and again. My heart sank. I never received any response. I stared at the stack. Neither had my mother. Daniel continued. I went to her apartment after I recovered. She had moved. I searched for months. His eyes filled with tears again. Then someone told me she had left town. He laughed bitterly. I thought she wanted nothing to do with me. The room fell silent. A terrible realization was slowly taking shape. For 34 years, my mother believed Daniel was dead. For 34 years, Daniel believed my mother had abandoned him. Neither of them knew the truth. A simple tragedy, a cruel misunderstanding, an entire lifetime stolen by bad luck. I felt tears sliding down my face. So did Sarah. The three of us sat there grieving a life that could have been. A family that never had a chance. Finally, Daniel looked at us. I missed everything. His voice barely rose above a whisper. Your first steps, your first words, birthdays, graduations. He shook his head. I missed all of it. I moved closer and took his hand. You didn't choose that. Sarah nodded. You didn't abandon us. For a moment, Daniel couldn't speak. Then he pulled both of us into a hug. The three of us cried together. Strangers and family at the same time. Over the following months, our lives changed dramatically. Daniel visited Chicago. He met Michael. He met Sophie. Watching my daughter run into her grandfather's arms for the first time was something I'll never forget. Sarah visited often too. It felt as though we were trying to make up for 34 lost years. Family dinners became larger. Holiday celebrations became louder. The empty spaces in our lives slowly began to fill. But one question still lingered in my mind. Why had my mother hidden the truth until the very end? Several months later, I finally found the answer. While sorting through more of her belongings, I discovered a journal. Most of it contained ordinary memories, but one entry caught my attention. It had been written only a few weeks before her death. I sat down and began reading. The words immediately brought tears to my eyes. If you're reading this, Emily, then perhaps the truth has finally found its way home. For many years, I wanted to tell you everything. I wanted to find Sarah. I wanted to search for Daniel. But fear is a powerful thing. Every year that passed made it harder to speak. Eventually, I convinced myself that silence was protecting everyone. Now I understand it only protected my fear. If life has given you a chance to find each other, please don't waste it the way I did. Love each other, forgive each other, and never allow fear to steal time from the people who matter. By the time I reached the final sentence, I was crying uncontrollably. My mother had spent her entire life carrying guilt. She wasn't a villain. She wasn't selfish. She was human. A frightened young woman who made impossible decisions and then spent decades living with the consequences. I shared the journal entry with Sarah and Daniel. All three of us cried. But for the first time, there was peace in those tears. Not pain, not regret. Peace. A year later, we gathered together for Sophie's 8th birthday. The backyard was full of laughter. Children running everywhere. Family talking around picnic tables. Daniel stood near the grill. Sarah was helping Sophie open presents. I watched them and smiled. Then my daughter ran over to me. Mom? Yes, sweetheart? She pointed toward Daniel and Sarah. Our family got bigger. I laughed softly. Yes, it did. She thought for a moment. Then she said something I will remember for the rest of my life. That's the best kind of surprise. I looked around the yard, at my father Richard, the man who raised me, at Daniel, the man who helped create me, at Sarah, the sister I never knew existed, and at my daughter, the reason I finally understood what family really means. Family isn't only about blood. It isn't only about biology. Family is about love, about showing up, about choosing each other every day. The DNA test revealed a shocking secret, but it also revealed something far more important. that even after decades of loss, mistakes, and misunderstandings, it is never too late to find your way home. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone you love. Because sometimes one story can remind us to make a phone call, forgive an old wound, or reconnect with someone we've lost. And that decision could change a life forever. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next story.